I've had this story almost a week now. Believe it or not, it was on NPR. And it's a story that's never told about the ghettos in America. So I want to tell you this story about ghettos in America. We hear the liberals talk all the time, right? About we have these segregated communities in the inner cities. We don't use the word ghetto anymore, but ghetto is a perfectly legitimate word, and I will not be censured and told what words we can and cannot use that are in fact legitimate words. Believe it or not, this was on NPR. Historian says don't sanitize how our government created ghettos. He means the modern inner city. 50 years after the repeal of Jim Crow, many African Americans still live in segregated ghettos in the country's metropolitan areas. Richard Rothstein, a research associate at the Economic Policy Institute, as far as I know this could be some left-wing Marxist group, doesn't really matter, has spent years studying the history of residential segregation in America. Or it may be a conservative group, again, I don't know. He says we have a myth today that the ghettos in metropolitan areas around the country are what the Supreme Court calls de facto. Just the accident of the fact that people have not enough income to move into middle-class neighborhoods, or because real estate agents steered black and white families to different neighborhoods, or because there was white flight, says Rothstein to NPR. It was not the unintended effort or effect of benign policies, he says. It was an explicit, racially purposeful policy that was pursued at all levels of government. And that's the reason we have these ghettos today, and we are reaping the fruits of those policies, unquote. So let's stop right here. His hypothesis, actually his assertion, based on his years and years of study, is that the government created the modern ghetto. Well, that caught my attention. Does it have your attention? Let's continue. One of the ways in which we forget our history is by sanitizing our language and pretending that these problems don't exist. We've always recognized that there were ghettos. The ghetto is, as he defines it, a neighborhood which is homogeneous and from which there are serious barriers to exit. That's the technical definition of a ghetto. Robert Weaver, the first African-American member of the cabinet appointed by President Johnson as his Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, described many of the policies that this fellow describes today in a book he published in 1948 called The Negro Ghetto. The Kerner Commission referred to the ghetto. This is a term that we no longer use because we're embarrassed to talk about it. And we need to confront our history, this is the professor, and stop sanitizing our language and talk openly about what we've done as a nation and what we need to do to undo it. He goes on. He goes on and he says, it's a policy. Well, actually, let me do this. He says, and we can't talk openly if we're going to use euphemisms instead of being explicit about what the reality is. On how the New Deal's Public Works Administration led to the creation of segregated ghettos. Let me repeat this. On how the New Deal's Public Works Administration, the PWA, led to the creation of segregated ghettos, he says, its policy was that public housing could be used only to house people of the same race as the neighborhood in which it was located. But in fact, most of the public housing that was built in the early years was built in integrated neighborhoods, which they raised and then built segregated public housing in those neighborhoods. So public housing created racial segregation where none existed before. That was one of the chief policies. Wow. And I thought we were supposed to celebrate FDR, the progressives, and the New Deal. On the Federal Housing Administration's overtly racist policies in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, he says the second policy, which was probably even more effective in segregating metropolitan areas, was the Federal Housing Administration. You've heard of the FHA, right? Which financed mass production builders of subdivisions starting in the 30s had been going on into the 40s and 50s, in which those mass production builders, places like Levittown, for example, Nassau County, New York, and in every metropolitan area in the country, the FHA gave builders like Levitt concessionary loans through banks because they guaranteed loans at lower interest rates for banks, and the developers could use to build these subdivisions on the condition that no homes in those subdivisions be sold to African Americans. Your ears should be ringing. This is New Deal, progressive, federal policy. In the ghettos, government policy, municipal policy, for example, denied adequate services, garbage wasn't collected frequently, African Americans were crowded into neighborhoods in the ghetto because so much other housing was closed to them as a result. Housing prices in ghettos were much higher than similar housing in white areas. Rents were much higher than similar housing in white areas because you had a smaller supply. It's the basic laws of supply and demand. So this created slum conditions. So when African Americans managed to break out of those slums and buy a home in a neighboring area, whites could be persuaded that slum conditions were going to be brought into their neighborhood. So the real estate agents at the time would go into these neighborhoods and try to panic white families into selling their homes cheap to the real estate agents. And they in turn would flip these homes to African Americans at a higher price. This was all started in the 30s under FDR and the New Deal. This was all started for the purpose of taking integrated inner city neighborhoods and creating segregation through federal spending and federal policies, federal bureaucracies, and federal departments. This is the first I heard of this, and I read a hell of a lot and I study a hell of a lot. Is it the first you've heard of this? No, this story is a week old. Has anybody else even discussed it? Has this been on television anywhere, on any cable program? You see, ladies and gentlemen, as we discuss often on this program, you and I, so much about
Pewabi pottery is a mixture of two styles of pottery. Europeans and the indigenous Ottawa and Ojibwe people who are already in Detroit. The mixture of those two styles is Pewabi pottery.
Stand next to Jamal.
Now, what is this picture? Native Americans here, indigenous people. White folks. This white woman and her two kids. That's Lady Marie Calise de Cadillac. Her arrival less than a year after her husband founded Fort Pontchartrain du Detroit. So she comes months after him and lives inside the fort. Marie Calise de Cadillac. Remember, as I said, they were trading with the French, and they were coming to bring some furs, and one of the Frenchmen's dogs attacked one of the Ojibwe, attacked one of the warriors who were coming in to trade. And one of the Frenchmen, their dog bit him, and he kicked the dog. I mean, that's what you're gonna do. The dog like gonna kick the dog, and the French soldier killed the Ojibwe warrior for kicking the dog. Of course, that started a war between the Ojibwe and the French. They killed dozens of Ojibwe because of this.
That was the French and Indian?
No, this is just there were numerous breakouts that we don't call wars today. That's really what they were between the, so, because in a trade relationship, it's always, the Europeans were always trying to get over. So sometimes the Native Americans would get mad. You may have heard of Pontiac's Rebellion. That was one of those time periods when the indigenous people like, we going all in. And they killed a whole bunch of Europeans, but they lost. Pontiac was not able to defeat the British, in that case, the British. He wasn't able to defeat them. But he killed a bunch of them.
But then not enough.
Not enough, right. Wow. And of course, he ended up being killed himself by a Fox tribesman. They got him drunk and then killed him outside of Salem. February this year.
Excuse me, did I just hear you correctly? How can he be blamed with that? Excuse me, don't speak to us that way. It's not acceptable. No, stop it. Stop it right now. Step out. Step out. Then I don't want to hear from you. You don't speak to us like that. And this is the problem, the way you communicate. No, stop. Stop. You need to stop. You need to stop. Stop. Kipishchi. Mona can do anything to man in the miach. Asha weshkat kitosh to man in the manan, kikishakaskohono a man in the miach. Tabrishkoch eka in the nuyak. Ekwan a spanik. Ekwan magamorshago made the tagosiak. Tabrishkoch ekishakakipat the siach. You're a guest here. And you don't even know how to speak to us. You don't even recognize the tone in your voice and your delivery. And no, you're done. You're done. Next question.
How do you think?
You better be respectful.
I'm being totally respectful. I'm asking how. Let's just do it right.
We have a holistic genocide happening here. And I can speak for myself. You know what, white people? You've had your voice here for 524 years. 524 years you've been visible, white lady. You've been visible for 524 years. Look how fast your white man comes and steps up for you. Where is everybody else to come and step up for us? I have a right to my voice. I'm still fighting for my voice and my visibility. And I'm telling you right now, there has been 524 years of holistic genocide on Turtle Island. We're the ones that are dying. It's not you that is dying. And as far as how Justin Trudeau is doing, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is we're asking the United Nations to help us, that charges of genocide, a war against humanity, war crimes, and a crime of aggression be laid, because your Liberal Party was also responsible. Every party, every governance that has been in power, there's been a war conflict of Indian Residential School, 60 Scoop, Indian Day School, and Millennium Scoop. None of your governments have clean hands. All of your governments have blood on their hands. None of you are different. You haven't changed because you haven't started your healing journeys. The moment that we have our voice and our backbone, you want to shut us down. And you think you're privileged to disrespect us. The moment we tell you, because of your colonial mindset and your colonial way of being, your white privilege, your white fragility, you can't take our truth. Look how many people came to bat for you, white lady, and you're a guest here. Without us, you'd be homeless. This is over.
right? Oxford Dictionary. Look it up. Look for the book. If you have it, I will.
And Hawa said unto me, Go yet love a woman beloved of her friend and an adulteress, even as Hawa loves the children of Israel, though they turn unto other powers, and love cakes of raisins. So I bought her unto me for 15 pieces of silver, a half homer of barley, and said, You shall not play the harlot, you shall sit solitary many days. Like that, and you know it's like that. We gon' keep her cold and we gon' take our land back. We gon' keep her cold and we gon' take our land back. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back. Like that, and you know it's like that. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back. Like that. Like that in Inglewood, the game is digital. The war is spiritual, a Naga need a miracle. Who knew a miracle would come when we just listened to you? Now we hysterical, cause we didn't think your words to be true. Be the head and not the tail is what you taught us to do. Chase the tail, become the tail, what a Naga gon' do? Pull the trigger, slay the nigga with an attitude. Instagram, Twitter, feeding us the palm with no views. We the copper Indians and Moroccans and Hebrews. It's time to man up and stand up and rock in our shoes. We the Abyssinians, the mixed multitude. We the real life Nagas with an attitude. Switch the story up, they speaking in the allegory. Slavery and land invasion, that ain't half the story. The morning star, the star that's asleep I'm mourning. More and more war buried us in solitary. And Hawa said unto me, The children of Israel shall return, and shall sit solitary many days, without a khan, without a prince, without sacrifice. Afterwards Israel will return, seek Hawa their power, and David their time, and shall come trembling to Hawa in the end of days. Hawa pop off and drop off whoever necessary, and slay the hijack, especially these mercenaries. Traffic stops, killing cops, got Nagas driving scary. We're doing 60 on the freeway just to see our family. We're rolling 60 for Bro Nipsey and the Wood family. We're hitting 60 on the PJ for the royal family. We press the rough battle up with Ether Pack's family. Shabbat vibes in the tribe don't mean we that friendly. Fuck the internet, we moving to the library. Find a drop on how to stop familiar adversaries. Choosing up, drop a die like it's honorary. Cop shot my homeboy like it was customary. Trying to shield a child and yelled he had an open carry. He was carried off by 6 last February. Fuck Corona, man, we sicker than the coronary. American 1828 dictionary. And I said unto her, Thou shalt sit solitary for me many days. Thou shalt not play the harlot. Thou shalt not be any man's wife, nor will I be thine. For the children of Israel will return, seek Hawa and Kandawi, and shall come trembling unto Hawa and his goodness in the end of land. Like that, and you know it's like that. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back. Like that, and you know it's like that. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back. We gon' keep our code and we gon' take our land back like that.